Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. Today's going to be a talking and an example video because over the years I've had many people ask me, what can I do to stop my tools from rusting? And right now we're in the summer, but very soon we're going to be in the fall, and the fall and the winter is the time when tools really can start rusting. So stick around, let me show you some of the things that I've done. First of all, let's talk about how and why tools get rusty. And when you know that, that is the first big step in helping you prevent rust. So what happens when you have an unheated workshop? Almost everywhere in the country, what happens is during the day, of course, the air gets warmer, and your outdoor shed will get warmer, and it often will get warmer inside as well. And what happens in the evening, of course, the temperature drops, and the temperature also drops inside your shed. But the tools, very often tools in your shed, will take a longer time to cool down because they're heavier, they're thicker. It takes more time for them to heat up and cool down. And when they cool down eventually, but while they're cooling down, they're still warmer than the ambient temperature, and they attract moisture. And when you've gone out to look at your car in the morning and you see moisture on the outside of your car, it's the same effect that's happening. Your car has taken more time to cool down, so it has attracted the moisture from the air. So what are some of the things that we can do to prevent the moisture from actually touching the metal? Now, one of the things that might be working against you in your unheated shop is if you do put some heat in it. And there's basically two kinds of heat. And I want to talk about that for a second. There's this kind, which is what we call ambient heat. Ambient heat heats up the air, and it takes much longer to do because it wants to heat up all of the air in your workshop. This is a very safe heater to use because it's an oil filled. You plug it into the wall, set the thermostat on the end, and over time it will warm up the air in your workshop. The other kind of heater, and the one that I've used in the past, is called radiant heat. And I'm going to plug it in so you can see. And radiant heat works a little bit differently. It does heat up the air to a very small degree, but more than that, what it heats up is what it strikes. So I can feel the heat right now coming off of that. And where I've used radiant heat in the past in my unheated workshop was just right around my bench. If I had to do something on the table saw, I would go to the table saw or the jointer, go and cut whatever I needed to, then bring it back to my workbench to do whatever work needed to be done, assembly and things like that. So my workbench was always sort of the warm place, and I could keep my fingers warm because it heated just what it struck. So that's another way of heating or getting some heat in your workshop without heating the whole thing. And when you turn it off, when you unplug it or turn it off, that's the end of the heat. With this one, when you turn it off, it takes a long time for it to cool down. Eventually it does. And now you're back to the moisture striking your tools, which is what I'm going to talk now about. Now, one of the things that you can do to control the moisture content in your workshop is this product. And you can purchase these little stands for them, and the way they work is you pour the product in here, and you can see that I'm using this one. It's been well used, and you pour these granules in, and this is the end of this bottle for me. Then you put the lid on like this, and what happens is the way this works is it attracts the moisture from in the air, and it actually condenses it into the bottom, this little area down here. And then after a few weeks or so, you can just pour the moisture off, and then you may need to refill this up. You'll have to keep that full. So that's one way, and it actually works quite well, but it's slow, but it does help to control the amount of moisture that you have in the air. One of the things that I did when I had an unheated workshop was I built this cabinet, and for those of you who have been watching my channel for a while, you know that it has these doors that can close, but I never close them anymore. And the reason I don't need to close them anymore, but at one time I did. And the whole purpose of this cabinet was to enclose it, because at one time I was using the dry air thing in here, but I moved along to another product that I'm going to show you that worked so well in a place like this, because I could keep most of my hand tools, and I've changed things a lot now, but I kept most of my hand tools, my drill bits, a lot of that stuff in this cabinet, and I could keep it rust free with a product like this. So this is that product, and I'm going to open it up because when I purchased these, it actually comes double packaged. It comes in this plastic bag, and it also comes in a cellophane wrap. Now what it is, these are emitters to somehow they stop the corrosion between the moisture and the steel. And you know what? They work great. And here's why I know that. And one of the cabinets that I have is still outside, an unheated cabinet that I keep some tools in, but I want to keep them rust free. And I use these anti-corrosion. They stop the rust from forming, and they only work in a confined area, so it's like a locker or something like that. I think this one is good for 5 cubic feet. And the way they work, all you do is cut the final, in this case, the final plastic off, and I always put a date on them so that I know when they need to be replaced. You don't do anything to them. There's a sticky back here that you just need. In this case, you just peel that off and stick it to the side of the inside of your cabinet, and it's good for at least a year before your tools might start getting rusty. Now, you're going to ask me, what's with the blade? This is an old plane that I have, not a very good plane, but what I use it for, this is my canary in the coal mine, and I put this in that unheated cabinet. There's no oil, there's nothing on the base of this. The only reason it's in there, and you can see it's got a little wire on here, so I use it for hanging, and it hangs in the air, and I know that if this is getting rusty, that these aren't working, and this is 3 years, and look at how shiny that is. So I know that this works because there's no rust on this pure metal. Now the other thing you're going to ask, why have you got the blue tape on there? The other thing is there will be no rust forming underneath the tape because air can't get at that, moisture can't get at that. And I put the blue tape on there so that I can compare it to what's already exposed, and you can see that they're identical. So these little emitters work just marvelous, but they only work in an enclosed area, but they will keep your tools rust free. And I put a link on my Amazon store so you can see what these things look like, because they come in different sizes. You can even have pads of them to lay in drawers of your workshop or of your cabinet. Lots of options with those. Now, one of the other things that you can do is you can use something called a Goldenrod, and this isn't one of them. This is my mock-up of what they look like, and basically they're a rod. They come in various lengths, 18 to I think 24 inches, and they plug in. They look basically just like this. And what they do when you use them in like an enclosed cabinet, like a lock or something, they're perfect because they give off a very low amount of heat. So what that does is that stops that temperature fluctuation. Now they call these dehumidifier. It's not really a dehumidifier in the true sense. All it's doing is heating up your cabinet just a little bit, keeping it a little bit warmer than the air outside, and what that does is it prevents the moisture from forming on your tools. And they're not that expensive. I think they're like $30–40, something like that. And of course there's a little bit of draw on them, about the same as a light bulb or a small light bulb. So it's another way of keeping your tools rust free. What I did find that worked exceptionally well, simple motor oil on top of my table saw and my jointer. And the way you do it, I just squirted a little bit on. And you need to put on enough that it's going to protect it, especially if you're going to be away for a few days. Then when you come back to use the table saw, get yourself a clean rag and just give it a wipe down. You don't want to coat this really heavily. You don't need to coat it really heavily. You only need to put a light film on. And when you come back to use it, give it a wipe down with a clean rag. Well, in the end, there's a variety of ways to help prevent rust. Something as simple as motor oil, a very light coat of motor oil on some tools will work fine. Other tools that you're using, that you're hand holding, that you don't want oil on, something like this, a rust inhibitor, works great. And there's no quick, simple answer to any of these, because what you do with a table saw and what you might do with a chisel might be completely different things. So you really need to look at what your situation is, understand that variations in temperature are a big cause of why rust occurs. And of course, it is the moisture in the air. So if you can reduce the moisture in some way, that will also help you. So a variety of things that you can do, and I'll bet you all of those experienced woodworkers out there that follow this channel will have some other great tips that we'll learn from as well. I'm Colin Cadet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.